Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our UCLA Anderson Faculty Chat with Professor Jane Guerin and Julie Lacouture from 2006, brought to you by UCLA Anderson Alumni Network and Impact at Anderson. I'm Jill Baldoff, Associate Dean, Alumni Relations. Today, we're trying something a little bit different with our faculty chat. We've heard from many alums about the pressure on nonprofits, especially those who are not in the medical or healthcare focus. And who better to bring you perspective on fundraising during the time of COVID than Professor Jane Guerin in conversation with Julie Lacouture, founder of Goodways, a nonprofit consultancy. Julie has broad experience in nonprofits, including being a teaching associate with the UCLA Anderson and Johnson & Johnson program, as well as teaching about online fundraising at UCLA Extension. She led fundraising for the Southwest region of DonorsChoose.org, and she founded Goodways Consulting in 2014 to help nonprofits raise awareness, support, and funding. And most notably, Julie drove the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile through 14 states running promotions and events. Professor Jane Guerin is an attorney and a mediator who teaches law and management of nonprofit organizations at UCLA Anderson. Her private law practice specializes in nonprofits. Jane and Julie are going to speak for approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions. We encourage you to ask questions. Please use the Q&A feature that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Julie, Jane.
Welcome, everybody. First question for Julie is, we know that citizens in the United States are among the most generous in the world. Total charitable giving in the past few years has been around $400 billion a year. Understandably, in the wake of the pandemic, it appears that initially some Americans want to support hospitals and health causes. They're holding back on giving to educational and environmental causes. My first question to you, Julie, is what is it like to be fundraising now in this environment?
Thanks, Jane. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm always excited to talk about fundraising. But to your question, it's hard. It's really hard out there. The things that are happening is that competition has increased. So we're seeing organizations that we wouldn't normally see fundraise act like fundraisers. So local restaurants trying to raise funds to help their employees, small businesses doing the same. I've even seen New York Times start advertising its subscriptions with a little bit more fundraising type language of like, now more than ever, it's important to support us with the subscription. And that's very much nonprofit territory, it feels like. So we've seen this competition increase, and then money is growing tighter for individuals and for foundations and for corporations. So it's gotten much harder. I don't know too much about the statistics in the last 6 weeks. It's hard to get a handle on it. And I think what we're seeing with donors is not necessarily that they want to support healthcare organizations, but they want to support places where the need is greatest. They want to make a donation that makes a tangible difference in the life of someone that is suffering right now. And that tends to be towards health causes or frontline responders. So on one hand, right now, we're seeing really great creative stuff that's going on that's energizing and inspiring donors to help. And for example, we're back to old school telethon models with Tina Fey did basically an online telethon with Robin Hood Foundation earlier this week that raised $115 million to help New Yorkers in need. So that's very exciting. We're also seeing small family foundations really step up and meet needs that they might not have done before. They're really giving more right now. And we're seeing people give outside of their usual giving patterns, whereas like people might give more near the end of the year. Now they're giving now. And that's kind of hopeful to see. But on the other hand, it's different for every organization. So some, as I mentioned, are right on the front line and they're making their case to, help us help those who are in need. Others are having to pivot their programs because they are not able to deliver services in the same way. So that raises costs and then also causes chaos. And then there's another group of organizations that just might feel benched right now, or like they can't do very much right now. So we see it just really depends on what kind of organization you are.
Continuing on that, in this new environment then, how can nonprofits who are not involved in COVID-19 related causes pivot so better to position themselves to stay in the public eye?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think that the thing I've seen with organizations is they're really drawn by their desire to do the most good. And that's a really good instinct, because that is in essence following the market. That's what customers, donors want to see. So when I am talking to organizations right now about like getting back and getting into the spotlight, as you said, or getting back into a place where donors will pay attention to you, it really goes back to the basics of marketing strategy, right? Those 4 Ps, product, price, promotions, place. A lot of times when we talk about fundraising, we think it's only promotions, but really what you're talking about of pivoting or revisiting your broader mission is working on your product, is working on what do you do as an organization. So I've seen a great example is the Boys and Girls Club of Los Angeles Harbor. And they are a big Boys and Girls Club. They have a bunch of different locations. And when this hit in March, they had to shut down all their community centers because their model is, we are a place for kids to go. And they were like, we're sidelined. What can we do in this time? So they did the first, usual things of like just kind of putting their curricula online and trying to reach out to people that way. And then they, as an organization, made this really, I think they did not make this decision lightly. It is probably a risky move, but it has really worked out for them, where they've said, this is not something we usually do, but we know our families rely on us to provide a snack after school. And we feed a lot of kids when they come here. So if we're closed, that means our families are without that resource right now. Can we deliver food? Like, can we be a food resource for our families, and not just the families we serve, but the broader community? And I will say that they made this decision also at the same time that their annual gala was canceled. So they were facing a loss of revenue and a new business model. But the thing about it is that the community responded to it and said, yes, this is you helping people at the place they need it most. We are here for you. And in talking to the executive director, Mike Lansing, who's a great leader of that organization, he said, when we first started doing this, there was like a little response, and the next day it doubled. And then the word started getting out. And he's like, I've been running around, my community, because somebody was like, I want you to work with local restaurants and get meals for families to people. And he's like, I just call restaurants now. He's like, I never thought that this would be what my life looked like. But it was that change in product that changed how they talk about themselves. And it came from just such a wonderful, authentic place. So I really love seeing that kind of stuff. But can I show one more example?
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
So another interesting one is of an organization called Human Rights Campaign. And I'm going to share my screen here. So Human Rights Campaign does a lot of advocacy around marriage equality. And the people that are involved with them are really feel like they're part of a movement and feel like they're part of a club. And they knew that right now was not the right time to be asking for donations to support policy or that kind of stuff. But what they did know was that people loved their branding, which is this little logo right here, the little equal sign. And so they put it on masks. And the ask they made to their community was, if you make a donation, we will send you one mask with this logo on it that you love. And they were also going to send, I think they were going to send 2 masks to an organization that needs it. So it was a partnership. And this was a really nice way to help their community feel like they're making a difference. So again, this is a product change. And so I love seeing this stuff.
No, great. Those are fabulous examples. Thank you. So it sounds like how incredibly important it is to stay relevant. And I guess the next question is, how do you convey that to your donors and others?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that sometimes in nonprofit, it feels like, is anyone listening to us? And it's really about marketing your success. So I think that some messaging that I've seen out there has been a little bit, woe is me, we had to cancel this, so we're not going to see this revenue. But the ones that are being more successful are really talking about, this happened, here's what we're doing about it, here's our response, here's what makes, here's how we know we're making a difference. And it's really about using all of your channels. So your social media, your website, your just your email communications alone, to continuously reiterate your success. So you're marketing your success. And I'll show you an example of that, because I mentioned them before. And this is simple. So the Boys and Girls Club, as I mentioned, did this pivot where they kind of went to food delivery. And this is the front page of their website. So they're very clear about what's happening at the centers. And then immediately we move into, here's what we're doing about it. And they're really good at making these quick videos. And the thing I like about it too is you can see the title of it is Keeping Our Promise. So they're tying it into what they normally do. But they're showing you this in action, and it's really nice. And it's also really simple. They take it one step further though. They're giving updates. And then here's how you can support these efforts. This video right here is one of their board members who is an expert in this area, talking about the CARES Act and how it has changed the tax deductibility of gifts. Not the most exciting video, but a really interesting video, because I like it because it's board member participation, but also it answers a bunch of questions. I learned a lot by watching it. This is the front page of this organization's website. So they're really doing a great job of talking about the one thing that they're doing. They've made it really simple. The information is pretty bite-sized, and it's really focused on the donor of like, here's how you can help. So I love that example. The other thing that we always say about talking to your donors is it's one thing to say things at your donors or say things to your donors, but it's another thing to make it interactive. So let me see if I can get to another screen here. And this is an example. I'll shout out a fellow Anderson alum, Andrew Glazier here. Defy Ventures, which works with people in prison on business plans and job skills. This is a very simple page, but what they've done is they've invited their community to write letters to people who are incarcerated, to say, we are here, we support you. And this is a very simple form, and it lets people be involved. So this is a way too of participating in the mission. So it's not just telling you things, but it's getting people to interact and to engage. So it's a little bit of the next step.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. That's excellent. Thank you. And also, many nonprofits are asking, how do they raise funds using social media? And is that really the right way to think about it?
I'm glad you asked, because I get this question a lot. And asking how to raise money with social media is a little bit like me showing up at your house and saying, like, what do we want to do with this hammer? So I always try to rephrase that question to like the real question should be, what do you want to build? Where do you want to go? There are so many different tools in online fundraising. I made a PowerPoint, of course, because
that's good.
I think they take away my MBA if I don't. So these are just like, so I don't even think this is a full list, but these are all the different tools you could use ostensibly as fundraising tools. So sometimes we get really excited about one tool, right? So we say, how do we use social media to raise money? And I think what happens is that's a little bit the cart before the horse, because we have to go back to like, what do we want people to do? What's our message? Like, what are we all going to do together? Who are we targeting? Are we targeting people that don't know us yet? Are we targeting people that are already on our list who have given before? So to come at it from the tool is a little bit backwards. But I will say that with social media, where I see it act the most powerfully is when your supporters share your message to their social networks. That's really, really a great moment, and you have to earn the right to do that. But I'll show you. So we look at Facebook fundraisers. You can see some started by organizations. You can see celebrities do them. And this one's a really interesting one for me. So we raised, like this is a $10,000 fundraiser that John Krasinski did for his birthday. And this is a famous one and also a unicorn kind of fundraiser. This is the fundraiser Facebook page started by just two people who happen to be a fan of this organization, Reimagining, who does great work. They started this one and it just took off. I'm sure everyone saw this one and it raised 20 million. So the power of your supporters to reach people they have influence over, people in their life who know and trust and like them, that's really the most powerful part of social media in my mind. When we see that though, sometimes on the outside, it's really easy to say like, oh, well, we couldn't do that. We don't know a celebrity, or we're not that. It's important to understand like when you see huge success out there, that organization probably did a lot of work behind the scenes to get people on board in an offline way before it went online. So sometimes, I guess what I'm saying there is they don't always go viral. That racist one is an anomaly, but they do better when you can work with the people that already know and like you.
Okay. We know that historically online fundraising does not yield as much as donations as personal appeals. In this new COVID environment, where face-to-face appeals will clearly be a lot less frequent, I'd like to know, how has it changed the way we should approach online fundraising? And what are some of the tactics successful nonprofits are using now to raise money online? Kind of a big question, but
yeah. Well, I think there's two questions in there, right? So there are tools where you can, so like in terms of the personal appeals usually are what you do for your major donors, right? So in every organization, what's considered a major donor is different. But usually, it's an individual that wants to give at a higher level, usually in the 4 or 5 figures. And those conversations leading up to that gift are often, it's not usually just one ask and they're like, yeah, sounds good, let's do it. But it's usually a series of engagement and stewardship to get someone to that point. We don't see online fundraisers aimed at major donors. So to say like, everyone give $10,000, that doesn't happen via email and that doesn't happen online. But I think that in the situation we are in right now, I think it's still possible to do like one-on-one appeals, and that is using the telephone, using video conference, and I've told all of my clients that, if you feel like if life feels crazy to you right now, it also feels crazy to your donors. This is a great time to just reach out and to check in and see how they're doing. And I gave that advice to one organization I worked with, and then they called me a couple of weeks later and said, we just reached out to see how this person was doing, and we told him what we were doing to respond to this crisis. And he said to us, if I could give any more money right now, I would, but I can't. I'm sorry. And they said, oh, no, that's not what this call's about. Fine. The next day, he emailed someone that he knows that said, I forwarded your information to a friend of mine who forwarded it to forward the information to a friend of his, who ended up being a Grammy Award winning musician who is now donating probably $50,000 to this organization because he's donating his commercial fee for an ad that he's shooting right now. And that happened from one conversation that got forwarded to 3 people. So you never really know with those conversations what they can yield. To go back to what are the tactics successful nonprofit organizations are using to raise money online, I think the most successful organizations are doing a really good job managing their donor journey. So when we think about how someone becomes a donor, once I had someone ask me, how does a person become a donor? And I laughed because it made it sound like once you're a donor, you're not a person. But I do think that sometimes that's how we treat donors, because here's the process everyone goes through. It's awareness, engagement, getting asked, getting thanked, understanding their impact, and then they can kind of go back into that cycle of giving and advocating and getting more involved with the organization. And so I made the joke before about, is a donor not a person? Because I think where most organizations fall down on the job is in the very beginning. So like getting people engaged before they ask. And then at the very end, wherein we sometimes acknowledge donors saying, you made a $20 donation on this date. Thank you. They get an automatic email, but we never thank them, and or show them what their gift did. And that is a different thing. So like a donation receipt is not a thank you. And so I made the front half of this orange to say, like, this is stuff that marketing tactics and online fundraising and tactics and techniques can really help you with. But when it starts to turn blue, that's where it's not a marketing process anymore. It's a one-on-one process, right? So we have to be better at this end of the spectrum. So, but I want to give you some examples of organizations that are doing a good job with this. So the thing that I'm going to show you are organizations that have campaigns that are distinctly in one of these columns. So sometimes I see campaigns where it's like, we want you to share a picture and use this hashtag and then also give. And you're like, oh, this is so confusing. There's so much stuff I'm being asked to do here. Is this a giving campaign or is this an engagement campaign? So some organizations that I like what they're doing, let's see. We'll look at some engagement ones first. Okay, I'm on the wrong slide share. All right, here we go. So I'll go back to Human Rights Campaign. This is in the engagement part. So Human Rights Campaign does a really good job engaging potential donors before they ask them for things. And so they did a thing a couple of years ago where they asked their community to share pictures. They put it together as a movie and it came right before their ask. This year, what they did, this around April 10th, they did a digital care package. And it just was virtual care package, and it had a Spotify playlist in there. And there was a message of support, and they really just put it out and they said, we're here with you and we want to see we want to be here with you while you go through this time. We're having, it's a hard time for everybody. And it was just a really lovely email communication. And because they branded it as this virtual care package, and there were so many elements around on the internet, people were kind of coming in and becoming aware of them in different ways from all different aspects. Another great engagement piece is from LACMA, who, they're closed right now. So they have created some Zoom backgrounds that you can download of art in the museum. So you could, have this famous wave behind you, and you can download all of these right on their website. And it's a nice way to engage and remember that LACMA is an important institution in town. Another example I have, and this is more of thanking, this is the MLK Community Health Foundation, who supports the MLK Community Hospital in South Los Angeles. And they created a website that was all about the COVID-19 response. And one of the important things that they're doing, is on the other end of the spectrum, is they have this scrolling banner thanking everybody that has just done anything for them. So there's some that are donations, but this is a collaboration with Wells Fargo to bring their staff meals. This is just, thank you, Tom. And tents and Carol sewing gowns. I mean, it's really, really heartwarming. And this kind of stuff gets people thinking about how they can be involved.
Great. Before we go to the questions, I think we have time for one more comment. And I've discussed briefly some of the new opportunities that are available now. So I thought it'd be great to share that with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think there's a lot of new opportunities right now. I mean, one of the things is that this crisis is so overwhelming and so hard to deal with. Everyone's kind of on the same page, and that's a new thing. We don't usually get that in nonprofit. Like, everyone really understands what's going on. I saw an article that said people everywhere are getting a crash course in empathy. And I think that's true. People feel helpless and they want to help, and nonprofits make that possible. And I think it's really important for nonprofits not to forget that's their value. When you are fundraising, you're not begging for money, you're offering someone an opportunity to make a difference. And that's hugely powerful. And I also think right now there are huge opportunities to expand your reach outside of your current city. So when we think about that donor pipeline, and when we think about online campaigns, the biggest difference is how many people can you reach with your communications? How big is your email list? How big is your social media audience? Now's a great time to be expanding that, because people everywhere we're all online, like we're all in one room. So I think there's huge opportunities to expand your reach outside your current city. I've seen some really great stuff here. So I wanted to share some of the virtual stuff that I'm seeing. And this is, okay. So this is Sweet Farm, which is an animal sanctuary, and they have, their farm is obviously closed, but they said, what do we have? We have a bunch of cute animals, and what is everyone doing? They're on Zoom calls nonstop all day. If you make a donation, we will bring a goat to your meeting. And so they call it Goat to Meeting. I think it's so cute. And this is a really nice way to get someone to make a first donation or to give someone a reason to give again. And you can see, I think this is a Zoom call with a llama on it. And I called them and really desperately tried to get a goat into this webinar. And I was a little late, but next time.
Next time.
Next time. Another great one I saw was let's see, what is their name? The New York they have a long name, New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Sorry about that. They are pro bono attorneys. And so they decided they were going to do a campaign to donate your commute. So it's a bunch of lawyers. And so this is one of the law firms that is that works with this nonprofit organization. And they were like, you're at home, you're not buying a coffee every day, you're not paying for parking, you're not driving into work and paying for gas. Donate your commute money to these two organizations. And they're very smart to do something to say, you know, it goes to these two organizations. So one is the New York Lawyers for Public Interest, and the other is our local food bank. And that's really smart to say, you know, you're going to support us, but you're also going to support an urgent need right now, which we don't offer. We're not going to create our own services around this, but it goes to both. I thought this was really creative because it gave people a price in their mind of how much to give, and it also split it into two ways. So it really gave the donor what they wanted, which is to be a frontline responder. And I think I have some others, but I think that's probably great. A lot for now.
Julie, this is incredibly helpful. Much appreciated. I think it might be time. Should we go on to some questions from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oops. One of the questions says, can you talk more about how to work on the price part of fundraising?
I think I know who asked that question. Hi, Kevin. So the price part of fundraising is how much does it, so in normal marketing, it'd be like, how much does something cost? So I think there's two ways to work on price in nonprofit. So one of them is goal setting. So I'll bring up the example again of the Boys and Girls Club of LA Harbor. And one of the things that they've discovered is like they can feed people during the week, but what they want to do is start a weekend program where they can give people like a box of food. And they've been really smart to price it and say, it will cost us $500,000 to do this for this many families for the rest of the year. So they have given their donors the price of what we will all accomplish together. And that's the first part of it. The second part of pricing in fundraising is how much you're asking an individual for, how much you're asking someone to give. You want to set it up in a way where it's on their willingness to pay, not necessarily on like how much everybody else is asking for. So basing it off of competition. That kind of pricing goes on your donation form to say like, okay, so if we make the donation levels, $5, $10, and $15, what are we communicating about our need there versus making your donation levels maybe a little bit higher? A lot of organizations will tie their donation levels to service to say, if you donate this much, it means this. So letting people get that picture in their head. And that's how I think about pricing and fundraising.
Thank you. That's great. This was actually one of our questions that we didn't get time for. How can organizations that have historically relied on event fundraising, the big gala once a year, and this one in regional offices, pivot to online events while making donors still feel involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a huge issue, is that gala fundraising is sometimes the anchor to a fundraising plan for the year, where it's like, well, we know the event will bring in this much. And now when the event's not there, how do you bring in that much? So there's a lot of different tactics here. So I have seen some organizations take their gala and move it online. We had a really good example where Chrysalis last night had an online fundraiser where there were some pre-recorded segments and then some live segments, and they went back and forth, and it really felt like you were at their gala again. And they had, I believe they called people that had been involved in past galas and said, can you lend your name to this? And they raised a good amount of money with that, with their online auction and the live stream. These are hard to do though. It's as much as planning an event. So I think that you have to respect the medium that you're in. And you're probably not going to be able to pull exactly how you did your gala into online land. And the thing that I would advocate for all organizations is break it down into bite-sized campaigns, because a lot of times you don't know if it's going to resonate with your donors. So you might say, we did a gala and we always have a performance piece, and we have an online auction and we have an offline auction. We do all these different pieces. Make each one of those its own campaign. So like sending it out to your donors and saying like, here's our online, we're going to do the auction online. It's going to be open Monday through Friday. Let's see what you want to bid on and let's see what we can do. And if we all work together, we can achieve this goal. And then maybe in a couple of weeks you say, okay, we're going to do the online performance, and then we're going to do that part of the gala online. That might actually mitigate some of the risk of putting all in on one event. I've been a part of 5 online fundraisers in the last 6 weeks, because my husband works in entertainment and his friends are super talented. We've been doing online shows that are to benefit organizations. And we've not had the involvement of the organizations on my insistence, because I was like, don't bug them, they're very busy. But we've raised about $100,000 for food banks, for Partners in Health, for Lift Communities, who's a nonprofit that helps families in need. And those are a totally different monster, because it's people who are fans of those actors want to tune in and see something. The fact that they're doing good is a bonus on top of that. And that's a totally different type of online fundraiser.
Thank you. This question involves a nonprofit that seems to traditionally rely on government grants. And so the question is now a good time to start fundraising from individuals and foundations, and I guess switch from government grants?
Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to diversify your funding streams. I think that's a wise move. I think one of the things that organizations should be clear about when starting individual fundraising or starting foundation fundraising is that there is a ramp up period, right? So you don't just start putting messages out there and then the individual donors just start running towards you with money in their hands. We can see sometimes a 9 to 18 month ramp up period before your individual donor program starts reliably giving you money. And a lot of that is reliant on what is the size of the list you start with. And I should be really clear, I never recommend and strongly suggest you do not buy a list. That doesn't pay off. You've got to build your own list. And it starts with the people that know and like you.
Okay. This is the question involved with someone who's in the middle of a capital campaign. And now that it's stalled by the epic, what do they do?
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. It depends what the capital campaign is for. So I think that it goes back to saying like, here's the thing we want to do. How is it relevant right now? You're kind of in the same boat. I got a marketing message earlier today from a shoe company that was like, buy high heels. And I was like, oh gosh, what would I use those for? And it felt like that they were trying to sell me something I didn't need right now. So for the capital campaign, I think you've got to figure out, what does giving to it right now, how does it make sense in this environment? Or are you going to make a statement like, we're putting this on hold and we're going to pick it up once we're on the other side of this because it's so important. I should also apologize because my neighbors started leaf blowing and it's very loud to me and I hope it's not to you.
Well, mine's mowing the lawn next door, so.
Friday, it's the day for lawn grooming.
Yeah, I hope it's not bothering you. Shall we move on?
Sure.
This sounds like a very delicate one. How does one tactfully suggest that prospects consider end-of-life issues like advanced healthcare directives and legacy gifts during a time when such mortality questions are in our faces? In other words,
Interesting.
yeah.
So like donors giving to organizations in their wills is usually a function handled by major gifts officers or when,
Attorneys.
yeah, attorneys, but it's always with someone you have a relationship with. A new donor, I would not recommend having this conversation with a new donor. Usually we see a lot of this with hospital fundraising, where they will put a resource section on their page and say, if you were interested in doing this, here's how you do it. But it's never, I don't think I've seen anyone be very successful with marketing that of, now's a good time to think about this. And I don't think that's what the question asker is suggesting. But because it's always a one-on-one conversation with someone, the way to do it is absolutely dictated by the person to whom you're speaking.
Yeah. This question is, I think it might need a little bit more. My organization is exploring merchandise like masks. Does that work? We're concerned about inventory and fulfillment.
Yeah, that's a hard part of that product fundraising. Sometimes that stuff just breaks even. So one of the things I'll back up. The best indicator of if someone is going to give to your organization is if they've given before. So getting someone to give because they get something is a great tactic for new donors. So if you can say, we want to do a promotion for people that have never given to us before. And for those people, we're going to offer them, something. Or that human rights campaign example that was more based on their community, but I think they had a different strategy there. But to say, if you give, you get. We're going to send you this in the mail and you get something for it. That's a pretty good strategy to get someone to enter into a relationship with your organization. The downside of that type of ask is that sometimes for the donor, it replaces their real reason for giving. They can kind of diminish what they thought about the organization. It's like, oh, I just gave so I could get that bandana or that coffee mug or that tote bag. Or you get what you would see in for-profits, like coupon behavior, almost like they wait for the sale or they wait for you to have a good gift. So I think just be careful about who you're pointing it towards. It's okay to have that be break even if you can get them to give again, and know that there's always going to be some percentage of donors that will only give to get. And that's okay. Don't worry too much about losing them as long as it's not all of them. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was excellent. Thank you. Here's another one. Could you speak about how COVID-19 is impacting corporate sponsorships?
Yeah. So corporations are feeling their coffers tighten as well. But the thing that I've seen that's pretty hopeful is that any corporation that has had an existing relationship or an existing sponsorship with an event has been really gracious about keeping that in place. And part of the reason is because the money's kind of already allocated. So I've seen a couple of organizations have to cancel an event. They've gone to their corporate sponsors and said, we're not having this event anymore. You're a sponsor of it. Would you consider moving your sponsorship funds into a general operating grant? And a lot of times they've said yes. Sometimes they've even come back and said, well, let's try to do something with our customers. Let's try to publicize this. Let's try to do something a little bit different. Corporate relationships, again, are one-on-one relationships. So having those conversations, I think, are really, really important. Now is not probably a great time, excuse me, to go to corporations you do not have a relationship with. They are probably feeling overwhelmed with asks. So, but they have been, I would say, I've seen a lot of companies be very good about reaching out to new organizations. I've gotten a couple of calls just from people saying, like, do you know an organization that does this in this place? We'd really like to put something together.
This is an interesting one. What are some of the best practices you've seen from communicating the need for funding for overhead, especially now when employment is so fragile?
Yeah,
Overhead.
I love talking about overhead.
I
So
know.
the thing is, donors are not interested in the inside baseball of how your organization budgets.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I am as a donor. Let's talk about your overhead. But so I think that you've got to make budgets in you have your internal budget, and then when you do your project-based fundraising, overhead has to be a part of those costs. Like it has to be allocated across projects. So if you work in a shelter, for example, and you're asking someone to fund, the laundry room because you're like, it's really important for the people that shelter here to be able to wash their clothes. We want to fund this laundry room. That laundry room needs to also have incorporated in its budget the overhead of the organization. It needs to be split up ahead of time. Making an ask for overhead to individual donors does not usually work. Foundations can be are good places to ask for what we call general operating support, where it's just like, help us keep going. That's a great place to do that. If you have donors who you've had a relationship with for many, many years, that's when donors really start feeling like, I trust you, I trust the organization, I know you will use this in the best way possible, whether it's for salaries or healthcare or your office expenses, they will give those unrestricted gifts. But as for an appeal to individual donors, I don't often recommend it. You've got to show donors the impact on the people you serve.
Especially new donors, obviously.
Especially new donors. Yes, there is a whole line of thinking in, I'm a huge fan of Penelope Burke, who wrote a book called Donor-Centered Fundraising. And she says we have it a little bit backwards. We ask too much for like, just support our mission, when we should be asking people for projects like, we're going to do this. And then you gently move them into support our mission. And sometimes we see it the other way, but she makes a really compelling case that project support is where it's at. And that budgeting part is part of it, making sure your overhead is included in that.
Great. Well, do you have your crystal ball out? Because the next question involves the crystal ball.
Perfect.
Looking towards 2021, where do you see the biggest funding shortfalls will they be for cultural the biggest funding shortfalls will be for cultural nonprofits? Is it foundations, individuals, city-state giving?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I wish if I knew the answer, I would be,
Right.
charging everyone for it. I think the best place to look for this is what happened in 2009. So at the end of 2008, we entered a recession, and it took philanthropy maybe a little bit of time to catch up to that. So like we saw a nice outpouring of giving at the end of 2008. And then 2009, a couple of things happened. One is that foundation endowments were down, so they were giving out less money. Individuals felt scared and felt like they had fewer resources, so they went down a little bit. But we also saw major donors give more. So it's always one of those things. I do not know what is going to happen, but fundraising follows emotions. It follows how people are feeling about their own situation. So if the market feels bad, if it feels uncertain, if it feels like money's tight, people tend to give less.
This question is it best to sequence your outreach for donations such as email, snail mail, and phone mail? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sequence. Yeah. I think I would talk about that like cadence, so when do we touch the donor with messaging? So for online stuff, sometimes I see organizations just say like, oh, we're not very good at online fundraising. We sent one email and we did not get a response. For email, you don't need one email, you need 6 emails. You need to have bite-sized information that comes over, a period of time. So you give people a chance to like look at it and absorb it and take action. That should be coupled with that messaging being on other channels, including your social media, on your website and that. So you really want to surround the donor with messaging. The way direct mail usually fits into that is you want somewhere in the middle of that a direct mail letter to land on their desk. And the reason why is if you can have a period of time where everywhere they look, they're understanding your message and they're seeing the need and they're seeing the ask, not feeling overwhelmed. Like, we don't want to do an onslaught here, but where it feels like, gosh, I've seen this in a couple places now. That's a little bit better for getting people to take action.
Here's an interesting question. How do you best look for nonprofit jobs during the pandemic?
Gosh, I think if this person is a student right now, I would say start by volunteering or doing a pro bono project. That's the best way to get in. I started my career in advertising and then did not enjoy my job and quit my job to be an AmeriCorps member, which is a year of service. And my parents thought I was nuts. And then I've spent 20 years doing it. So I'm not still an AmeriCorps member, but getting your foot in the door that way through a service project or a pro bono project or something like that is a really great way to get experience. One of the things at nonprofits that we love when people can come with an expertise and show us how to do that. So if you have something that you know how to do now and you can translate that to the nonprofit sector, we just love it. But it's important to get that experience as well, because sometimes people that come from other sectors aren't able to be successful in nonprofit because it's a different industry. We have different access to resources and stuff.
Thank you. I think we've kind of covered this, but it's worth revisiting. Any ideas on how to identify businesses that potentially could be donors to a nonprofit?
Yeah, I'm going to share a surefire tactic and then a tactic that's just a good practice. So surefire tactic, look at your individual donors and see where they work. You already have an advocate in that company. If someone's been giving to you for a couple of years and then works at XYZ Corporation, and then talk to them and say, like, what are the odds we could work with your company? Or do you know the way to do that? In corporations, they love to hear from their employees. They love if their employees would give them an idea of what to do for CSR. It takes a while, and it might take them time to like find the right person, but that's how I've always gone into corporate partnerships. The other way to do it, and the other thing you should do, is make a list of businesses around you who you think might have something in common with you. And that could be geographic location. So to say, we serve schools in this area, so let's target the businesses that are near those schools, or finding like we work with kids, and so here are organizations that or here are companies that have kid-friendly things.
Right, where it could be mutually beneficial to both.
That's right.
Right, it's a win-win.
It should be a win-win, yeah.
So you're actually doing something good for them as well, and it's a great way to approach them.
Oh, absolutely. You should walk into every conversation like that, because I think, as I said before, nonprofits are really, really important. And if we can walk into conversations and saying, here's what we can help you do, and that's for a corporation, for a foundation, for individuals, we're that vehicle to help you make impact, to do something special. That's how you got to do it.
And you're making them feel good.
Absolutely.
One of their needs.
Absolutely.
Which is easier to approach them. Right. I think we're almost at the end of our time. And I think we've covered just about all the questions. And Jill has arrived.
Well, I want to thank Jane and Julie for an absolutely fascinating chat. I have to tell you that chat was blowing up, Q&A was blowing up. My text messages were blowing up on my phone with people saying, this is amazing, and I love this, and I have questions about that. So I think we may be doing some follow-up programming, but it was really
Great.
fabulous and spot on. So thank you both.
We would love to do it.
Great.
Awesome. I got a text from my mom saying my hair looked weird. So I'm glad that those were your texts.
Yes. No, I would say all the text about your hair was fabulous. Don't worry about that at all.
Then my work here is done.
But we so appreciate you spending the time with us. I just want to let everyone know that I did put the link so that you can go to our Friday faculty chat page and see all of our chats. Julie and Jane's chat will be up in a couple of days, so you'll be able to refer to that. Next week, we're taking a brief pause because Dean Tony Bernardo has stolen our time, and he's going to be doing a Dean's Distinguished Speaker Series on this next coming Friday, and it will feature Peter Guber. So be sure and register for that. I think it's going to be an absolutely fabulous Dean's Distinguished Speaker Series, and we will be coming back to you after that. So stay healthy, stay safe. Again, Julie and Jane, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.